Hi everyone, it's Deborah Carter here from PreparationTech. Today I'm super happy because we're talking with Dr. Parves Khan, who is the Director of Research and Insight for Pearson, which is an education technology company. You may have heard of Pearson, it's probably the biggest in the world. Anyway, welcome Parves. Tell us what you do in 3 minutes flat.
3 minutes. Thank you, Deborah. Delighted to be here. Right, well, what do I do? Well, researchers like me, we create insights. You could say we're a bit of storytellers. So what my team and I do is we take data points. It could be customer sales data. It could be data on the way consumers are looking for information on our websites. It could be data from a customer survey. And we take that data and then we apply a bit of our own qualitative judgment to understand and explain why something is happening the way it is. After all, a collection of facts doesn't do anything by themselves. You know, you have to really assess those facts, interpret them, and present them in a clear and meaningful way. And that's where that storytelling element really comes into play. It can be so powerful. But people in roles like mine also have to then put on their business head and apply business acumen and wrap up that understanding into commercially framed options and recommendations that help their company grow. So what might that look like? Well, it could be blending all that data generated into insights to inform future product offerings. We might identify a new market opportunity, and then we present that insight to stakeholders that will then help our design team build and test proof of concepts. And if they work, we'll then come in to support the go-to-market strategies for those new products. So in a nutshell, that's what we do.
Great. I think that was almost 3 minutes.
That was 3 minutes.
So to really make this concrete, talk about a project that you've recently done. So because the people that are watching this are lay people, they're not really into data science and technology. So can you break it down a bit?
Sure. Right, well, a really interesting project I've been working on for the middle and high school market is identifying technological solutions to reduce teacher workloads. So essentially investigating areas of teachers' work which could be automated. One area is marking or grading end of term and end of year assessments and tests. Typically throughout a school year, schools would administer these assessments to measure how well the student is progressing academically. And they're usually a pen and paper exercise. Now in the UK, we love testing our kids. You know, we love to put them under lots of pressure.
It's not only the UK, by the way.
We test them all the time. Now that produces a ton of marking and grading for our teachers. And several studies have shown the high levels of stress this is causing the teaching profession. And you know, it's not much fun for the kids themselves. So at Pearson, the research team have been investigating the role of AI in particular, you know, the AI, so artificial intelligence. We know that the capacity and the variety of these artificial intelligence systems are increasing, and that with natural language processing capabilities, new possibilities for artificial intelligence in education are emerging. And one particularly exciting and growing area is using AI to auto-mark essays and schoolwork. We're seeing a number of tools emerge in the market. Currently, I'm leading on a product research initiative to support our design team working with high school teachers to co-create a new automated marking tool that can mark written work. So, you know, this isn't just like a sort of multi-choice A, B answer. It's actually looking at the language of a question, you know, how the student answers it, how they write that, you know, the answer. So it's pretty sophisticated. So at the moment, we're training that AI engine to improve its accuracy. And once we're confident that it can mark as accurately as a human teacher, then that's something we're going to get into the market. So really, really excited about that.
Wow, and parents shouldn't be afraid that the AI will somehow get this marking wrong, because I think there's a lot of distrust of this kind of technology.
Absolutely, and it's a really, really important question, and that's why we're going to take our time. We really, really want to train the AI engine until we're absolutely confident. And at the moment, we're piloting it with human markers, and we're kind of testing it against human markers. And we found at the moment, it's something like 57% accurate. That's not good enough. I mean, 57% is not good enough. We want to get to 99% accurate. And when it's at that level, that's when we're going to start to release it. So we're going to be doing a lot more piloting, and we're going to work with teachers. At the end of the day, they need to feel confident that this is something that's going to help them and not create more problems for them.
Interesting that you say that you have to train the AI, which means that you've got to pump a lot of data in. You have to have a lot of data set. And your work is really about data-driven research. What does that mean for people who don't understand it? And what are the points of data that you're collecting?
Well, up here, so, we source data from all sorts of places. We use text and web mining technologies, for example, to pick up behavior and sentiments online. And we carry out literature reviews of earlier studies, and we get a lot of data from those previous studies. We also conduct our own primary research, so where do focus groups or online surveys, and where do surveys with students, with teachers, with parents. When it comes to AI, where it used data from existing past examination papers. And we will have a ton of those papers. Historically, we might be going back 10 years, we'll be drawing all that data from previous assessments, from previous tests, to look at patterns and train the AI. But importantly, really an important point about any new proposition is the data from the feedback of the users, the parents, the students, the teachers. That's a really important aspect of the research too, because of course you can produce a wonderful, amazing new technological solution, but if the adoption to actually buy it and use it isn't there, then it's a redundant technology. So we have to look at willingness to use the technology as well. So that's another really important area of analysis and inquiry that has to come into play too.
Right. So Parves, tell me about a seminal moment in your life that really changed the trajectory of your career.
Well, when I grew up in the 1970s and 80s, I was born in 1970. I grew up really poor. We were children of first generation immigrants from Bangladesh. And in the city where I lived, most of them left school at sort of 14, 15, and then they went to work in the local factories. And, teachers often saw me just as another Asian girl that's going to get married off by the time, she's 16 years old. In fact, I remember when I was about 11, so I was at junior school just before I joined middle school. We had a kind of school career advisor. And she said, Parves, you're going into middle school. Have you got some ideas about what kind of things you want to do later on in life? And I said, oh, yes, miss. I want to become a lawyer. And, she paused for a moment. She looked at me with some pity. And then she said, well, Parves, you do realize you have to get good qualifications for that. You have to go to university. And how about a job in a local shop? I think, that might be more suitable for you. And I can give you some sort of brochures about some local department stores, and you can take those home and discuss those with your parents. So, it was pretty shocking thinking about that now, because of course I'm not hoping that doesn't happen. But that was very common in the 80s. So this would have been 1981 when this happened. Now, I don't hold any resentment against teachers like her, because it was true, lots of Asian girls did get married off, and that's all they ever really knew. But the fact is, if I wasn't so strong-minded and so stubborn, then that would have really lowered my expectations about what I can achieve in my life. And it could have set me up for failure. But what it did, fortunately for me, because I'm so stubborn, is actually, it made me even more determined to prove her wrong. And I was then really driven to actually succeed. And I did go on to college and I studied very hard and I got the grades I needed, went on to university. And also then I also did a PhD. And that kind of opened all those doors for me. And the rest, as they say, is history. You know, I sort of entered the world of work, very fortunate, straight away after university, managed to get a job and managed very successfully to sort of, you know, develop up the career ladder. So yeah, I mean, for me, it was a pivotal moment, but an example of where the expectations of your teachers and others can really lead to failure in life if you're not as stubborn, as determined as I was.
Right. Okay. So you're sitting here before me. You're totally into research and data science and all this stuff. How did Parves become this research maven who is on the cutting edge with AI and machine learning? Tell us about yourself. Tell us about your childhood. What did you like? What were your influences? What was your schooling like? Tell us about that.
You know, Deborah, as a child, I wasn't particularly academic, but I did have a deep curiosity about things. You know, why are things the way they are? Why does something the way it works? You know, how does it work? That's a great mindset for a researcher, because, you know, they're all about inquiry and trying to sort of understand things, to figure things out. So I guess I was in a way destined for a career that involved investigating things. But when I was really young, I had a romantic idea of being some kind of big shot lawyer. I think I must have been influenced by a lot of these American detective movies. The lawyer always seemed to be some really glamorous woman. And I thought, well, that's kind of what I'm going to be doing. Now, I didn't obviously become a lawyer, so that's another story, which we can revisit in a minute. But, you know, when I was at school, I excelled in subjects where I had the most interesting and engaging teachers. You know, teachers who really loved their subject and who were passionate about their subject, because that passion is really infectious for a young child. And for me, that was my history, my drama, and my English teacher. They are the ones that really inspired me the most. And I would say that they were really my early role models. And I truly believe that a teacher for a child can either make or break that learning experience, that love for learning. Interestingly, the subjects I did really badly at school were the subjects where I had the most boring teachers, and teachers who just didn't seem to want to be there. Luckily for me, I had these really great teachers, particularly my drama teacher. She was just one of those mother hen types who took me and a few of her other students. You have to remember, I grew up in the very early 1980s in a very working class, very poor area. I went to a local state school, and she used to take us to places like the theatre. Now, for girls like us, we'd never been to the theatre. That wasn't something that anybody in our community would do. So she opened up these new opportunities for us and helped us see a world outside our immediate environment. And that really, really helped me in terms of my ambition and my drive later on in life.
Oh, wow. This is fantastic. So can you remember one of your most favorite assignments that you did in school?
Oh, wow. Well, I loved acting when I was younger. And one of the most, one that I really found absolutely really sort of got me going, got me really excited as a child. Like I said, I wasn't particularly academic, is this play that I constructed on, there was going to be a nuclear war. You know, in the 80s, everybody was worried about the Cold War. I don't know if you remember, this was the time when America and Russia were always at loggerheads, and we were always worried there was going to be a Cold War. And I created this play, and the world had ended, but somehow I'd survived, and I somehow was a crusader, and I was going to save the world. And I remember just how exciting the whole experience had been, and just being able to really think outside the box about how you could sort of change the world. So that was really exciting, but it meant, I could really use that creativity. And again, down to my drama teacher enabling me to use that creativity. So that was a good point. But, I didn't, well, the point about not doing very well academically is that shouldn't hinder you in life. I really hated maths and STEM subjects. And look at me now, I use maths all the time. I became almost a statistician. And a lot of the problem is the way these subjects are taught. If they're not taught in a way that kids really are engaged in them, then they do kind of find them off-putting. Luckily, I sort of started to love those subjects as I got older. And at the end of the day, the kind of maths you use at work isn't necessarily the way you get taught maths at school. You're not necessarily going to be using algebra, but you are going to be using sort of day-to-day maths. And I wish they would really use maths in a way that was more applied, so people could really see the relevance of it once they go into the world of work.
Yeah, I'm so glad you raised that, because I was also a kid. I was failing math in grade 5, right? If you put a calculation in front of me, I would just panic. But now I use it all the time in business, right? But it's applied, and it's there's some kind of purpose to it. It's a problem-solving tool as opposed to like a straight calculation kind of thing.
Absolutely. And if they actually created a scenario like, how do they figure things out? Let's give them, why have you got so many freckles on your face, to a 5-year-old? Let's get them to count those freckles and have fun with it. It doesn't have to be just doing, sort of adding up numbers and subtracting numbers. We need to make it more fun for them. And unfortunately, we don't do that. But let's hope it's changing. I think I'm optimistic and hopeful that, it's going to get better.
Absolutely. I think you're the perfect person to ask. What do you think is the mindset, and what are the personal characteristics of people who go into research and into like data science, such as yourself?
Well, curiosity is the main one. You have to want to discover things and figure things out. So I would say that's number one. And you need to challenge. You need to be the kind of person that likes to challenge. You can't really use insights to unlock new solutions unless you're willing and able to test and challenge current assumptions about things. Let's look at education, given that we're on that topic, and Pearson is an education company. Up until a few years ago, Pearson was really best known as a publication business. We published educational books and courseware, mostly print, and mostly for the higher education market, university students. And then we started seeing sales dwindle, and suddenly it plummeted. And it was really only through our research with millennials, these digital natives, that we started to look at how they live their lives, and we came to appreciate just how quickly they were moving online. They were looking for content online, mostly free. And what was happening is a lot of these new digital challenger brands were moving into this space and taking advantage of this behavioral change amongst those students. So the Insight team, we had to really sort of pivot and do some quick research to find out what's going on. And it was through talking to students, we realized that we had to go to our leaders and sort of say, look, guys, we have to wake up and smell the coffee, so to speak. And eventually that led to us shifting gear as a business quite dramatically a few years ago, let's say about 8 years ago. And we became what is now a digital first education company. All our products and services are now powered by technology. So that challenging is really important. Even when you feel stakeholders are not going to listen, you have to be very persistent. The other skill that's linked to challenging, you could describe as cognitive flexibility, so to speak. There's probably a better way of describing that. But what I mean by that is you have to be able to view a problem from many different perspectives. You have to be able to look outside your immediate environment for ideas, and you have to be comfortable with complexity and ambiguity in a business environment. For example, you might find data which is conflicting and it doesn't tell a very coherent story often you're having to trade off robustness with good enough data. And you have to also be able to put that in the context of the bigger picture. So that's really important as well, that kind of mindset. And finally, you have to almost be data storytellers. You have to have that ability to articulate information in such a way to make it engaging, challenging, compelling, and also instructive to others, because at the end of the day, they need to be able to take action as a result of those insights.
Awesome. Very, very, very profound analysis of the characteristics. So thank you very much. You talked about being a digital storyteller. Tell us a bit about the tech tools that you use in your job. Are you looking at spreadsheets? Do you have customized kind of interviews?
Yeah, gosh, do you know, Deborah, I've been in the industry for over 2 decades. And I've witnessed and I've been actively pushing for a radical transformation over the past 2 decades in how we gather, store, and analyze data to help us better understand consumer experiences, behavior, and actions. You know, over the last, I'd say, over the last sort of 8-7 years or so, a key driver has been these data processing and data and text and web mining technologies, which continue to advance with artificial intelligence powered engines and also cloud computing. That's been really phenomenal because we can store so much more data now. So these new technologies, what they do is they enable us to now harvest and store huge amounts of both structured and unstructured data. And that's only really become possible through artificial intelligence and cloud computing. So for example, we can tap into conversations that take place online. So maybe we want to know about what young people are talking about when they're approaching exams. We can like listen into those conversations through social media. Obviously it's all data protection adhered to, you know, it's all, we're making sure we're not infringing any data privacy rules. So this is all open data. But these new technologies enable us to find out what's happening in real time, you know, the kind of conversations young people are having. We can then take that insight to make sure that we might be then able to come up with a new sort of help tool that might, you know, help them with revision, for example. So rather than wait till that moment is passed, we can sort of do something in the moment. It may be that actually all they need is something on a website that has like there's some of the key learning points that they're struggling with. We can quickly pivot and adapt as a company, and we can produce these new sort of solutions very, very quickly as a result of these new technologies. But it's not all about the technologies. We also use some of the more traditional approaches to capture data and work with data. So, you know, I'm still a big fan of spreadsheets, and I use Excel spreadsheets all the time. We use data visualization tools like Tableau, which helps you create fantastic dashboards, which are really interactive, and that's great. But, you know, I still use PowerPoint to create reports of findings, which I share with my stakeholders. So it's a combination of some of those new high-tech tools as well as some of the traditional tools to, you know, compile all the data and to help us analyze that data.
Awesome. My last 2 questions. I think you kind of discussed it, but I want to ask it explicitly. What can schools be doing better to give kids some basic data science, data analytics skills, which are going to be so important? They're so important now. What can they be doing to do?
I mean, that's such a big question. And in fact, you know, I'm actually just starting a new study looking at the whole future of assessment, whether we're assessing the right things and how we're assessing it, whether we should be using more digital tools to assess. You know, I think schools need to look at these skills more broadly and think about what is the future workplace these young people are going to be entering, and how can we as educators best prepare them by providing them with the right knowledge and skills. You know, in our knowledge-based and technology-driven economies, you know, digital skills are a must. I mean, that is an absolute given. And schools are, you know, helping young people learn these IT user skills. So, you know, it's important that they can code and they can program. You know, that's a given. But I would also like them to teach them about how digital technologies and trends can transform societal and business outcomes, so that they appreciate, how does that bit of coding on a computer then support the developments of, say, a recommendation algorithm that you'll find on Amazon and Netflix. So, I'd like them to really sort of make that linkage between just that actual coding to the power that coding has to actually, have some really tangible outcomes for people in the way that they live their lives. So I think that is something where probably scores are not so great at the moment. So I'd like them to sort of get better at that, because it makes it more real for the young person. Mm-hmm. I think our educational system also needs to place more emphasis on developing skills in our young people that can't be easily automated in the future. We know more and more jobs are going to be automated. So let's think about the jobs that are going to be left behind. And there's sufficient research to show that the roles that are going to increase in the future are the roles that require skills like creativity and innovation. Our future workers are going to need to solve problems through unconventional thinking and bring new solutions to the market. And more jobs will involve breaking down sort of complex issues into easily understandable ones through working with others, often remotely, often globally. So let's think about the skills there. They need first-rate interpersonal skills, they need emotional intelligence skills, and they need cultural dexterity, because they're going to be working with people from all sorts of different countries. So those are really important skills to master, and I'd like to see schools focusing more on those skills.
Wonderful. My last question for you. Do you have specific actionable recommendations for parents and caregivers that they can start doing right now to get their kids these research and data analytics, data science skills?
Well, as a parent myself, I know you can't make kids do anything they don't want to. And I've got two. I have a 15-year-old and I have a 17-year-old. What you can do, of course, and this applies to parenting generally, is help our kids develop into well-rounded people and do what we can to create rich learning environments outside of school that's full of art and drama and sport and music. And we as parents, we all try to do that, don't we? And I'm not going to preach to other parents. We should do what we can, and we shouldn't beat ourselves up when we can't always provide those types of additional activities. But what we can do, all of us can do that, is we can create environments where we as parents or caregivers can nurture skills like problem solving and creative thinking, critical thinking in our young people from a really, really early age. Now, I mentioned that example about, freckles. Like, say your 5-year-old came to you and said, Mom, why do I have so many freckles? Or why is my hair curly? Turn that into a fun project where you can do some research together to find out, rather than just saying, well, let's just count them. Well, let's go and investigate. Let's find out why that happens. And that's really going to ignite those skills from a really, really early age. So I would just encourage parents to sort of nurture those skills from a really early age. We're doing it anyway. I think we just don't realize just how much we do. Mm-hmm. Now, as they get older and say they do show an interest in computers, for example, then of course, consider taking them to one of these free coding clubs that exist, and that's going to help to build their interest and potentially a career trajectory for them as well. And for older children, what I really think is important is find work opportunities for them, these work experience opportunities. That could be voluntary, it could be paid for when they're a little bit older. In the UK, they can start working when they're 16, and I made sure the moment my son hit 16, he had a job, a Saturday job in a local supermarket. And, these skills that they learn really sets them up for success later on in life. So I'd really encourage that as well.
Mm-hmm. Parves, it's been an amazing interview. Thank you so very much. I think that research and data science is a quickly growing area. So I think it was really great for you to give us some insights into what it is to be leading these kinds of teams. And I'm looking forward to presenting next week on the panel. Thank you so much.
Looking forward to it too. Thank you. Bye.